Hello, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I really want to talk about decision making in management, how managers actually make decisions in an organization. So what I'm going to do is actually talk about sort of the rational decision making process in management, then define, kind of go into what this rational decision-making model is, then get into, why it's so difficult. What are some problems that CEOs, managers, top managers, people within organizations, everyday people, why it's so difficult to actually make any particular decision. So I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and this is something we study for a long time. It's been studying probably for the last 60 years or so, if not more, where we've been looking at managerial decision making within all sorts of kinds of different organizations and businesses and companies and stuff like that. So, coming from sort of large bureaucratic organizations to thinking about sort of the large sort of large public firms, the ones that you think of like GE, like Apple, for example, all these large companies to sort of small startup-y kind of things. People have been studying this stuff for a long time. And one thing that we do know is that managers, CEOs, and virtually everybody are extremely prone to making mistakes. It's very difficult to make decisions in organizations. So we actually have a classic sort of rational decision-making model that a lot of people sort of talk about. So the rational decision-making model, what happens with the rational decision-making model? Well, there is steps to the decision-making process, and the step in this process as defined by, this is the way that we used to think managers and people actually make decisions, and still people model it that way. It's a really nice way to talk about it because it's sort of clear, it's ordered, and we think this is the way that we should make decisions. So decision makers in a company or wherever, they should analyze the environment, look at all the sort of issues that are happening in the environment, come up with some key issues that they'd like to address. And then once they have these particular key issues they want to address, then they come up with different alternatives that they want to address, or sort of ways to reduce or to solve those particular issues. Then they come up with some sort of criteria to rank order, to order those alternatives. So figuring out which one is the best one that they should particularly choose, right? So you might have 3 or 4 different alternatives, and then you rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you pick the one that sort of fits the best, that solves all the particular issues that we have. And then you go and you just implement, you execute, you go through and actually pick that particular alternative and run with it. And then that solves the problem, right? The problem is virtually nobody does this decision-making model in organizations. It's really nice and it makes a lot of sense and it's very intuitive, and we like to teach that in a business school. So I am in a business school. We actually like to teach that kind of stuff because it does make it, you end up getting, at the end of it, you get a very, very nice decision. There's a lot of different problems with the rational decision-making model, and sort of it doesn't really display reality very well. And that's the last 50 years, we've been talking about how this kind of breaks down. It doesn't make sense in organizations and for people, right? There's been a lot of people talking about this. Jim March, he's been talking about this. He's a wonderful man. He's been talking about this for years and years and years. Richard Syrett's been talking about this. Herbert Simon. Herbert Simon actually won the Nobel Prize years ago on this. It's been going on for a very, very long time. Jim March he should win the Nobel Prize. He was so influential in a lot of different fields. Amazing guy. And this has been going on for a long time. So we know that managers actually just rush into the decision-making process. They do a lot of shortcuts. They actually don't actually think through a lot of their decisions very clearly. They do what are called heuristics and shortcuts, where they just kind of pick the thing that is sort of most intuitive. versus in things that are guided by emotion. A lot of affect, emotion drives decision making in organizations. A lot of that is driven by things like politics, for example. So we know at the organizational or at the individual level, when CEOs make decisions, we're prone, and everybody's prone to these kind of things where we just do gut reactions. We think that we're doing the best thing, so we don't necessarily have to go through and actually rank order things. So we just actually end up doing those. We kind of go into an automatic state as well, where we just kind of execute. So there's a sort of a active state where we make decisions like this, but then there's also an automatic state, which is virtually most of your day-to-day life is going through these routines, this automatic state where we just kind of execute and don't really think about anything. And this is all makes sense. This is perfectly rational. It doesn't make rational decisions. You don't get the best optimal decisions. That's what we're talking about, the best possible decision. But it's perfectly rational for an individual because what you're doing, it's called actually boundedly rational. What you're doing is you are given the amount of constraints that you have, that you just are limited by time and limited by what you can actually look at around the world around you. You can't sort of forecast the future in any sort of way. You forget things in the past. You can only sort of keep so many things in your mind. It's really difficult to sort of do all that stuff and compute all of that stuff. Even the largest computers in the world can't really do this. So even the largest computers are really boundedly rational. They have limited capabilities in what they can do, which often allows us and forces us to make these sort of decisions that are more like on the gut, based on gut or emotion or reaction and things like that, where we actually just don't sit down and sort of calculate and think through the things that we do. So there's lots of stuff going on, and the reason is there's lots of stuff going on around us always, right? And you just can't process all of that kind of stuff. It's just really hard to intake everything and make sense of everything. That's why we have a focused sort of attention where I'm focused on you right now, and everything's out in the periphery. Even sort of evolutionary, we don't see these things out here in the periphery very well, but I could see you very well by the focus right now, right? Well, I can't see you, but you know what I mean. And that happens in organizations, and managers don't necessarily make the best possible decisions virtually all the time. And we're just kind of making do. And you would think that organizations themselves would make a better decisions because there's so many more people doing things. I mean, some of these organizations are hundreds of thousands of people now. But you think that there's so many more people, they have all of these resources, the money and all this kind of stuff, and yet they still make, and they have computers, massive computers, right? And they still make these problems and mistakes and errors, and we are not really good at making decisions, even with all that stuff, because there's other things that happen at the organization level that interfere with this decision-making process. So, for example, there's politics, as I mentioned before. So people are sort of reacting to sort of political motives. There are things like, there's sort of status levels in the organization. Sometimes it's really difficult as a lower level person to actually sort of communicate some problems to a higher level person in an organization, in a company. There are things like, just information overload, that there's lots of different things going on and you're trying to sort of coordinate all that stuff. And a lot of this stuff is really, it's a lot of what's called decision making under uncertainty, that the world is very uncertain and we can't predict things and we can't make sense of them. So organizations try to do that and try to attempt it as much as possible, but they still make bad decisions all the time, make poor decisions all the time. They try to make the best possible decision they can, but they often turn out to have what are called unintended consequences, so problems that actually happen along the way. So really what I'm trying to get at, so what I'm really truly trying to get at here is that people are really truly limited, and it doesn't matter and I think some of the key takeaways that from what I'm suggesting right here. So it doesn't matter, how much money you make. It doesn't matter where you are positioned in a company. Whether you're the CEO or somebody that's sweeping the broom. It doesn't matter if you're a judge. It doesn't matter if you're a lawyer. It doesn't matter if you're a garbage man. we all make mistakes. We all have all these sort of problems that we're facing. We all react emotionally. And even in a big company, they all still make mistakes and have issues and stuff like that. So what we should do is treat decision making, particularly in management, right, when you are sort of looking after somebody, we have to treat it with a lot of caution. We have to sort of recognize that it's very, very difficult. And I think CEOs, very senior CEOs have been around, that have thousands of people underneath of them. They really are very sympathetic to this sort of decision making, the problems that they have. It's very difficult often, particularly with an ethical decision, where there's not a real good answer one way or the other, which one you should choose. They both are terrible, right? There's one thing we know in philosophy, that there are terrible decisions that some people often have to make, right? So if you're a military leader, for example, do you send in troops knowing that they're going to get killed? Or do you have some civilians? Maybe you have, say, 10 more civilians that actually get killed if you don't send them in, right? So you're kind of balancing that off, and what you're trying to do is often really, really not clear. And truly, managers and CEOs, military leaders, people at very, very high levels, they are, they're often in tears with these decisions, and they wrestle with them. They're up at night. They're really difficult to make. And it's never clear what the right thing is to make with these decisions, particularly as you get more senior within the organization, because you're dealing with more ambiguous things that have real major consequences, but they're never clear in what you should do. The other thing I wanted to point out is that, we're all fallible, right? We all make mistakes. So even if you're at the upper echelons in a company, you're the CEO, for example, just know that it's okay to make mistakes. You just have to address them and be responsible when you make those mistakes. We all make them. That's totally normal. That's part of life. So it takes a lot of this burden of, I should be the best possible military, whatever, like somebody that is just a robot and they're making these decisions and stuff, but we don't, right? Like, we're human and we're allowed to make these mistakes as long as you address and you're open with these particular mistakes that we make. It's often the third thing that I'd actually like to point out with all of this is it's really difficult to make decisions in any particular organization. It doesn't matter what kind of massive organization you are. Sometimes it's harder in a bigger organization. But you should often try to do your best, right? You actually should try to, when there's an important decision, try to sit down and actually try to do the rational decision-making model as much as you possibly can. Maybe you don't do it, but you get somebody else to do it and help you along the way sort of figure out what's going on and really stick true to that. And there's some really great things that are happening in the business environment now that are sort of forcing us to do that. So for example, some of the issues with analytics and some companies that are taking a really strong role on this, where they're showing some really cool things, like Google, for example, they're doing some wonderful things with sort of just how we actually make decisions in companies, where they're bringing in very senior people from business schools that are teaching and that they're recognizing all of these particular issues. So professors from business schools are bringing them in and creating sort of special units that are dedicated to decision making, because we're starting to realize that this is important and we all make mistakes along the way, and it's really difficult to understand this decision making process. So if you like this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the videos as well. I try to put out these things as much as I can. So anyways, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.